Okay, so today we're going to talk about multiplying and dividing with signed numbers or real numbers. So, first thing we want to talk about is let's think about, well, what does the word product mean? Product means, yes, the answer to a multiplication problem. Okay? So, what is the product of 5 times 4? 20. Now let's say you owed me $5, but you borrowed $5 from me 4 different times. How much would you owe me? 20. So that would be negative 20. A negative 5 times a positive 4 would give us a negative 20. What if I had you borrowed $4 from me 5 different times? How much do you owe me? Still negative 20. So what you're going to notice here is if you have different signs, your answer with the product of 2 different signs, the product of 2 different signs is going to be what? The answer is going to be negative, okay? Now we were talking about the idea of a negative times a negative. And I gave you the example last time. If you had, you know, somebody who was, like, let's say a little kid who was misbehaving. They weren't going to go to bed. They say, I'm not going to not go to bed. What did they just say they're going to do? Yeah, the not means they are going. They are going to bed. So when we have a negative times a negative, what do we end up getting? A positive. So what would negative 5 times negative 4 be equal to? Positive 20. So the product of 2 numbers with the same signs is, what would it be? Positive. Okay? So if the 2 signs are different, now what if we were to put in some more numbers in the mix? What if I had 3 negatives? So negative 3 times negative 2, what's negative 3 times negative 2? Would be, we're multiplying, right? So it'd be negative 6, right? What if I had negative 3 times negative 2 times another negative? Negative 4. Well, still the negative 2 times the negative 3 gives us a positive 6, right? What's a positive 6 times a negative 4? Negative 24. So when we have an odd number of negatives, what's our product going to be? Negative, when we have an odd number. Okay, there was a student in one of my classes and he had a way that he thought was fun for him to remember this, okay? The rules. He said, if you have 2 positive people and they get married, like multiplication is like marriage, right? If you have 2 positive people and they get married, are they going to have a positive marriage? Yeah, they will because they get along, they agree on everything. What if you have 2 negative people and they get married? They're actually, no, they're going to have a positive marriage because they both see the world through negative lenses, right? So they actually get along. What if you have somebody who's a positive person marries somebody who's a negative person? Divorce. There's going to be the divorce. There's going to be the negative marriage because you see they don't get along. One person says the glass is half full, the other person says the glass is half empty. Now, what about with 3? Well, they had a positive marriage until Oh, a negative person came into the mix. Oh, there's probably a cheating going on. Okay, anything you can do to remember this. Okay. All right, so what about this one? If I have 4, negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. What's negative 2 times negative 2 is 4, positive 4, right? 2 negatives. Times, now we have 2 more, these couple. That's a 4. What's 4 times 4? 16. So if we have an even number of negatives, we'll have a positive. So here we had an odd number of negatives. Odd number of negatives gives us a negative. Here we had an even number of negatives, and that's going to equal a positive. Okay? I gave you a problem. I said, what is negative 3 times negative 2 is 6. And now I'm saying, what would happen if I take that same positive 6 and I multiply it by a negative 4? So I have an odd number of negatives. Our answer would be negative 4. Okay, so what about when it comes to exponents? Well, actually, I'm going to turn the page. Okay, let's take a note on this one. Let's go back to the odds and evens for a second. If I have a negative 2, that's a negative 2. What's the opposite of negative 2? A negative negative 2. This would be 2. What if I had a negative, negative, negative 2? Did I close it enough? So how many negatives do I have? 3. So a negative negative we said is a positive. What if we make it negative again? Negative 2. What if we have a negative, 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 negative 2? 1, 2, 3, 4. So a negative times a negative is a positive. Then that would become negative. Then it would become positive again. This is similar to the idea of what if I had an exponent? So what if I have negative 2 squared? Yes, that would be negative 2 times itself. Negative times a negative is a positive 4. Yes. What if I had the negative sign like this on the outside? Is that negative going to be included when I square the number? No. So here, if it's on the outside, it would end up being negative 4. This is something that a lot of people get confused about with the negatives, okay? Because we're squaring 2, and then we're going to make it negative after the fact. If I don't have any parentheses, is the negative being squared? Is the negative being squared here? Here it is because it's inside parentheses. Here it's not, and even if you type this in on your calculator with no parentheses in with it, here this is the exact same example. This is going to be a negative 4. Try it on your calculator, okay, just to confirm. Your calculator knows the order of operations. So if we put parentheses negative 2 and we square it, that's negative 2 times itself, which is 4, right? Well, this one is positive 4, right? Now, if I put the negative outside, 2 squared, I don't put the negative inside parentheses, what do I get? Negative 4, because that negative wasn't being multiplied by itself. Okay, what about with a fraction? Let's say we have a fraction 1/4 squared. What would that be? What's 1/4 times 1/4? 1 over 16. Remember, we multiply across. 1 times 1 is 1. 4 times 4 is 16. What if I put the negative inside? Is that one going to be? It's going to be also 1/16 because a negative time, if we write it out, it would actually be, sorry, I'll write it out. I didn't write it out. If I write it out, it's going to be negative 1/4 times negative 1/4, and we said a negative times a negative is a positive, okay, 1/16. If I put the negative on the outside of the parentheses, am I squaring that negative if it's outside the parentheses? No. So what's that one going to be? You put the negative at the end, negative 1/16. Okay. Questions so far? Okay. Let's look at fractions for a second. A fraction is just a division problem, right? If I write negative 36 over 4, this is the same as negative 36 divided by 4. The rule for division is exactly the same as the rule for multiplication. If you have two different signs, it's going to be negative. So negative 36 divided by 4 is? Negative 9. Okay, great. So negative 9 here. So we're just reducing fractions. What if I had a negative 4 divided by a negative 2? A negative divided by a negative is going to be a positive 2. What about negative 100 divided by negative 4? So negative divided by negative is going to be a positive 25. Okay? Now when it comes to fractions, if I have negative 100 divided by 4, what's that going to be now? Negative 25, because yes, the sign, because here I have a negative divided by a positive. What if I had a positive 100 divided by a negative 4? Also negative 25, right? A positive divided by negative when the signs are opposite. Okay? What if you guys, I had $100 and I told you I was going to divide it among all of you. Let's imagine there were 10 people. How much would we each get? We would each get $10 each, right? Now let's say I owe $100 and I want to divide it into 10 equal payments. Equal payments. So I owe $100. How do I know I owe it? Because it's negative, right? How much am I going to make for each payment? Yeah, negative 10. I owe $10, so I'm going to pay, each payment is going to be, I'm going to pay $10, so that means that's money I owe. Okay? What if I have $0, you guys? I actually do have $0. And I'm still so generous that I'm going to split it up with 10 people. You all can share my zeros with me. How much am I each going to give you? Oh, 0. So why this is important, and you laugh about this problem, but this is important because anytime with a fraction, if you have the numerator is 0, automatically the answer is 0. But the denominator, what would happen if I had that same $100 and now I left it in the room, no one claims it, it's divided by 0 people. How much does each person get? It's actually what we call, it's undefined. Because here's the thing, when $100 is in the room, someone's going to claim it. And when you have $100 claimed by one person, its denominator is 1, right? Always on $100, the denominator is 1 because it's implied that someone's going to claim that money. If $100 is floating around and no one claims it, how much does each nobody get? You can't actually split up $100 no ways, 0 ways. So we call, anytime the denominator is 0, we call that number undefined. Now when it comes to a fraction, let's say I have the fraction negative 2/4. Can we reduce that fraction negative 2/4? What does it reduce down to? It would reduce to negative 1/2, right? 2 goes into both numbers, so 2/4 reduces to 1/2. What about the fraction is negative, the numerator, the denominator, or both? It's actually the numerator or the denominator could be negative, but not both. Because what would negative 1 divided by negative 2 be? A negative divided by a negative is a positive 1/2. Okay, so of course I have a few, since we've gone over the rules actually for multiplying and dividing are actually a lot easier than adding and subtracting. Adding and subtracting, you have to think a lot more about it. Here we just need to notice the sign. So again, I would say a good way to practice these is to use flashcards. And that could help you studying your multiplication tables as well. Who can tell me the answer? -6 times 9. Yes, and make it negative. Negative 54. 54, because remember that the digits have to add to 9. 5 plus 4 is 9. 54, right? We have an odd number of negatives here, so who can tell me what the answer is to this one? Yes, negative 24, good. What about this one? -56, good. Could you reduce that fraction? Or what would it be? If it's a negative divided by a negative, it's going to be a positive 2/5. Good. Here's just a division problem. It looks like a fraction. -72 divided by 9. -8. Good. Think about if you can reduce the fraction. 1/2, right? Because 11 goes into both, 1/2, and it would be a positive, yeah? -2, good. What's the difference between these two? Right. So this one's -2. This one is -1/2, right? What number goes into 7? Reducing. Yes, reducing. Good. Well, it is a fraction is a division problem, but still the numerator is less than the denominator, so it's a proper fraction. What about this one? This is an improper fraction. Can it be reduced? -9. Good. How is that one different than this one? So here we have, this is an improper fraction. This one right here is a proper fraction. Can we reduce -9/81? What number goes into both? 9. So 9 goes in here once, 9 goes in here 9 times. So both of these fractions, they're different than each other. Let's just take a closer look for a second. So we said -81 divided by 9. What's the answer to that one? -9. What about -9/81? What's that one called? Or what would that reduce to? -1/9. So what's the relationship here? These two numbers are called reciprocals. What would happen if I multiplied a number by its reciprocal? What do I get when I multiply a number by its reciprocal? Right, negative times a negative is a positive. So we have a positive. This is going to be 9/9, which is 1. Anytime you multiply a number by its reciprocal, you're always going to get 1. That's going to be on the activity that you work on. So similar to the idea of this problem. What would be the reciprocal? First of all, let's reduce the fraction. What would that fraction reduce down to? So what number goes into 11 and 120, and 121 evenly? 11. negative 1 over 11. What would be the reciprocal? Yes, so negative 1 over 11, the reciprocal of that would be negative 11 over 1. Usually we don't put the 1 underneath though. Okay, so I think you guys should be able to try this activity for 10.4 now.